Welcome back to the channel. This is part one of a series that discusses the UK CPSA and the US NSCA. In this segment we're going to cover registered shooting in the UK and the US, CPSA governance, mandate and overall role, Iain's marketing and product background, a rifle conversation that turns fortuitous, and Iain's passion for shooting and his love of the job.
Iain, thank you so much. Welcome to the United States. Thank you for agreeing to sit down with us. We have, as Americans, a bunch of questions about how CPSA works and what registered shooting looks like in the UK. And I'm sure we'll draw some comparisons and differences to the US. But just to get us started, if you could introduce yourself, you are CEO of CPSA. Could you tell us a little bit about what that means, but then also how broad is the governance mandate of CPSA? Because by contrast, NSCA, which is a part of skeet in the United States, is just sporting clays. But your remit is a bit larger. So if you could kind of give us a little bit about your background and then the total scope of CPSA, that'd be great.
Sure. Okay. So first of all, thanks for inviting me here. And so the CPSA, from a governing body perspective, we look after all the disciplines within the UK. And specifically within England, we don't look after the FITASC or manage those side, but we do look after the Olympic disciplines for England, and we also look after all of our home disciplines. And when you actually work out the number of disciplines, it adds up to 13, including some of the minor disciplines. And we actually manage and run and select 7 England teams as well. So
7. So sporting,
FITASC from an England point of view.
Right.
Then we've got DTL, ABT, English skeet.
What's DTL and ABT?
Down the line.
Trap.
Trap.
Ah, okay.
And ABT, automatic ball trap.
That's a wobble trap.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And we have England teams for those. We run home internationals between the other countries within the UK. So that's at that competition side. So back to what does the CPSA do? We're the national governing body for England, and our governance is for clay shooting across all the disciplines, right the way through to the Commonwealth Games. So that covers all of the English and British Open Championships, the World Championships that we partner with the NSCA on, so it alternates. And then also right the way through, as I say, to the Commonwealth Games, where we select the England team to go there every 4 years. And then that's at the sort of, the championship level, competition level. And then it's our responsibility all the way through from grassroots right the way through to, the championship side. So that's everything from governance of the sport, developing the sport, bringing new people into the sport, the commercial side of the sport, working with grounds, training referees. We run a course program that's everything from referees, safety officers, all the way through to, we've got a whole series of coaching programs right the way through from coaches all the way through to tutors. We run that throughout England as well. So the governance side of it is, complete A to Z as far as clay shooting goes in England. You asked,
and that's a little different in the US, where skeet essentially owns sporting clays, though they have a slightly different tiered governance structure. But then trap, right, is a whole separate organization, American Trap.
Yeah.
And then there's an Olympic committee that's doing its own thing with the Olympic sports.
Yeah.
So.
And we have British shooting, which is funded by the government, and that they select the Olympic team. So as I said, we take the England team all the way to the Commonwealth Games, where England competes at the Commonwealth Games, and GB, the Great British team, in Olympic trap and Olympic skeet, that's selected by British shooting, and that's a body that they have a selection process. That's my background.
So yeah, let's go back to that for a moment. You have a background in brand and in non-shooting organization management. Can
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. I originally started in the sports industry as a product manager. I was working in the golf industry in the early 90s for a Japanese golf company originally. And then I sort of went from one sports company, stayed within the sports market, ended up in the surf, snowboard, mountain bike industry, was a part owner in a UK company that did well, and we expanded. And my background was very much product, marketing, product development, design, route to market, how to improve products, and how to market them and expand the business. And then I did that for a number of years, worked in America over in the fly fishing industry, not too far away up in Massachusetts, for a US fly rod company. And then when we sold that, I moved back and joined a brand marketing company, which was a little bit different. It was a licensing company where it was all about brands that we signed up and represented and took them around the world, doing license deals from them. So it was quite different, but it was still about brand. It was still about product, because we found partners to make products for the brands that we represented, which was everything from fashion to automotive to food brands. So it was very varied, and it was global. We had a US office, a Hong Kong, Asia office, and an office in London for Europe as well. So I've always been very focused on a product, a brand, and route to market.
Right. So why, given that career history, why did you choose to focus on shooting sports, at this particular phase in your career?
And we'd sold the business, the licensing business, and I was actually on I was actually going to take a year out and like fly fish, saltwater fly fish. So I was actually, my wife had said, take a year out,
Seychelles,
and go and do all the favorite places and have a year out. But I also was a rifle shooter, target rifle shooter. And I was at Bisley shooting there, and I used to come over to the US and shoot sort of long range metal, the metal sort of gong targets, that sort of thing. And one of the guys I shot with there, he turned around and said, "Oh, the CPSA are looking for a CEO." And I turned around and shrugged and said, "I've never heard of the CPSA." And he said, "Oh no, they're literally on camp, and they're the governing body of clay shooting." And I said, "Well, I clay shoot every now and again, usually before I was going to go game shooting. You'd sort of get, before the season started, go and shoot a few clays, but I'd never heard of the CPSA." So long story short, their interview process was quite long with the board of directors. But when I went for the first one, I told them, I'm a clay shooter. I've shot all my life, and I've never heard of you.
And maybe you need a brand guy to help with that.
Exactly. And went through quite a long process of, I think it was 4 or 5 interviews with various board members, and was successful. And it's been one of my favorite jobs. I've from day one, once I got to know some of the shooters, people turned around and said, "Why the heck have you taken that job?" It's a real poison chalice working for the governing body. We're the government for the sport, so we have to tell people what to do, so you're not always popular all the time. But I look at it as there's a lot of passion from the members, and it's sometimes can be misplaced, but most of it is always because they care about their sport. And I tell my team and the staff and even some of our board of directors, don't forget that the members, we're a membership association, and we've got to look after them. We can't give them everything they want, obviously. We've got to govern the sport, and we've got to do it with a long-term strategy in mind. But yeah, I mean, I love my job. It's a great job, and luckily I love shooting, and I do a lot more clay shooting and hardly any rifle shooting now.
Well, it's good to have you on our side.
Yeah, and that's exactly what some of the board members said in the interview. They turned around and frowned and said, "Rifle shooting, no."
Yeah, what is this guy that aims a gun? I don't understand.
Exactly, and that's why my clay shooting, in all honesty, sporting wise, isn't that good. I trap shoot more than I sporting shoot. So. Yeah.
Let's talk about the size of the organisation, the different shooting disciplines, and let's compare the organisational structure of the CPSA to the NSCA.
Process, and they were purely focused on the Olympics.
So how big is the organization, both in terms of staff to manage 13 disciplines and membership, and how does the membership break out in the various disciplines?
So CPSA staff, full-time staff, we've got 13, based at Bisley, down in the south of England, not too far from London. Membership, we're at currently 22,500. It went down to around 20,000 during COVID, and then we bumped back up to around we fluctuate every month. It goes up and down, but around 22,500.
And how does that break out into the various major disciplines? I mean, how many can you break them out, accurately?
Oh yeah. If you take our registered shoots of obviously who's shooting what, if you added the sporting disciplines that we run registered shoots for, of English sporting, your sporting clays, super sporting, which we introduced a couple of years ago now, and sport trap, your 5-stand, same thing, different name. If you add all of those up together, you're at almost 70% of our registered scores are sporting orientated. Next one down, the next biggest one is DTL, which is the down the line trap, and that's around 13–14%. That used to be much bigger, and that is our oldest discipline. I mean, one of the trophies we compete for every year, the Dougal Memorial, the first time that was contested was in the late 1800s. It's actually the oldest clay trophy in the world.
Wow.
Yeah. And we present that every year. It's actually next month up at Bywell.
So your 30,000 members, or excuse me, 22-ish thousand members, doesn't quite compare to NSCA's 30,000 members because it's more than just sporting clays.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I think I'm sorry, one more thing. We were talking earlier, and it's an interesting similarity, I think, because a lot of the recent changes at NSCA in terms of classification and downclassing and everything come about because they've discovered the huge number of people who are members who aren't active shooters. And I think you guys are finding the same thing. Right?
And you know, when I started, I've been in the role nearly 6 years now. The thing that amazed me was that when you looked at the 23,000 members, around only 40% of that number shoot registered shoots. So it means 60% are members of the association, but never ever put a registered score in. And that's something that, you know, when I sort of identified that, or, you know, discovered that, one of my goals was always to try and up that number, you know, because my belief is that once you get people into registered shoots, they're hooked. Right. They get over the thing of it's a scary thing to shoot a registered competition. You've got a referee, you're in a squad, you maybe don't know everybody, and someone's keeping score. But once you do it, and the first one, usually people can remember their first registered shoot in whatever discipline, they get hooked, they're into it, and then for me, that means they stay being a member, because they need to be a member to shoot registered shoots. So an ongoing strategy for us is most definitely get more people into registered shoots, even if it's just week to week registered shoots, whatever discipline, and work towards the championships. You know, and I think the championships I always see as a product. And I've, over the last 6 years, we've improved. One of my goals and with my team has been to how can we improve our championships.
So how, from a structure perspective, and you know, in the United States we elect delegates. Those delegates then in turn create an executive council, who then in turn creates a set of officers, and then that's joined by Mike Hampton, who essentially kind of combines the organization and then reports into Skeet. So that's kind of our rough structure. Like, you know, what is your equivalent? You've mentioned a board of directors. So kind of how does CPSA organize itself?
So we've got
from members kind of on up to
so you've got the membership, and then the board of directors all come from the membership. They're voted in by the membership. There's regional directors and then national directors, and that equates to 8 directors that sit on the board. And then there's 2 directors that are brought in that have got a different skill set as executive directors, and they're actually brought in by the board. So there's 8 directors voted in by the membership, and then there's 2 directors that sit for 2 years. All the other board members sit for 3 years, and some of them have been there, multiple terms and times if they want to, and if they're voted in. So I report into the board. I'm not actually a board member, so I don't have a vote on the board. We have bi-monthly board meetings at CPSA HQ. I report to the board on the status of the association, on all the varying factors, and then any sort of decisions that are put to the board are voted on. It might be rule changes or funding or other things, and I'll update them on other not day-to-day operational matters. That's all left under my remit.
Right.
They don't really have it's not they don't have a say in it, but
yeah,
they
what
don't
you're
have
there
a say
for.
in it. And then when you mentioned about the county, we've then got regional county levels, and you've got regional committees as well. So it really goes county, region, CPSA HQ.
Yeah, so that would be similar to our state associations.
Yeah, and we're
are those essentially run by the regional elected?
And they're autonomous to CPSA HQ, and CPSA HQ, the staff of 13 there, they're very much operational. That's our role as far as what the board decide. It's our job to implement, be it a rule or be it a funding or an initiative or something.
So Richard Folds is one of the is a board member, right?
Correct,
I saw on the website. So he then has some regional responsibilities, right? And then he is also on essentially the national level governance.
Correct. Yeah,
right.
yeah. And they're all like that. So we have national directors that don't have a specific region, and then we'll have the regional directors that might be southeast, southwest, a northern region, an east.
But it's still a pretty small group. We're talking about with the two executive directors, 10 people.
Oh yeah, and it's maximized at 10.
Yeah. See, we have a lot of delegates that then gets to a group that size that then ultimately elects some officers. But
yeah, and I think it functions well. From over the years sitting on quite a few boards, trading companies, public companies. I actually think our board of directors right now is in a good place. They don't always agree on everything. I think that's a healthy thing.
They're not supposed to, yeah.
At board level, and some of them have obviously got more interest in certain areas of shooting. But we've got a good mix. We've got a couple of ground owners on there, so they understand that side of the commercial element of the business. We've got some England shooters who have shot for England, shot for GB on there. Obviously, Richard has done it all, from Olympic level all the way down. So it's great to have that expertise on there and that feedback of whatever the topic is. Our newest director, Colin Burrows, he comes from actually a film, commercial film background. So he's very much useful for me to talk about media, to talk about communication, and he's just joined us. So we're sort of roping him into quite a few new projects that we're looking at.
So the other thing there's a couple things I want to ask about there and follow up, but I want to just kind of make sure we're drawing the lines kind of for an American audience. This is specifically UK. There's no jurisdiction essentially for governance in continental Europe. And in fact, this is something I think most Americans may not necessarily understand. There really isn't what we would consider sporting clays in continental Europe. It's primarily FITASC and then some of the FITASC side disciplines like compact.
It is actually, when you look at the numbers, it's in Europe, it's predominantly trap. You go to any of the countries, they predominantly shoot trap there.
Meaning bunker trap.
Yes.
Right.
You know, we call Olympic again. You know, we call Olympic trap. We call bunker trap.
Not 16-yard American trap.
No. And if you go to, you know, an Italian town somewhere, chances are they'll have one bunker trap there, and that's what they'll shoot. And then, you know, FITASC over in, you know, FITASC Sporting specifically is, if anybody shoots sporting over there, it won't be sporting clays, it'll be FITASC.
Right. And they also call it sporting, which is confusing.
They just call it FITASC Sporting,
yes,
as opposed to sporting clays, or we call English sporting.
English sporting. Yeah. So I think it's important for our audience to really understand that when Americans think of the game of sporting clays, or you use the phrase English sporting, that's a game that really is only practiced in the US and the UK in any meaningful size.
In any meaningful size. I mean, over the last few years, you know, I've had various conversations with other associations in Europe that are interested in expanding it. And that's something, and even down into the Middle East and up into Scandinavia. So it's something that, you know, isn't really our remit as the CPSA, but it's something we have looked at. And is something that we'd help other associations with, because from our point of view, it's all about expanding the sport. And again, back to my focus of it's a product. I see that as part of the expansion of the sport and the disciplines.
And with that, it's time to wrap it up. We hope you found this video entertaining. If you have, hit that like button and leave us a note in the comments. We'd love to hear your feedback. Next time, we'll dig deeper into the CPSA and have a lot more questions for Iain. Please join us.